But there's something about Van Gogh's legacy which is much more important than his fathering this or that ism of modern art. Vincent's passionate belief was that people wouldn't just see his pictures, but feel the rush of life in them.
Work from?
Yeah, sure. I did print it out, so I have it in front of me.
Okay. Do I call you Monsieur Pictor, or what do I call you?
Yeah, you can call me Matt.
Matt, okay. So I had no idea, so now we know, okay. So Matt, can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yes, sure. I have actually no background in art whatsoever. I'm more of the scientific type.
Okay.
So,
but you live in France, right?
Yes. I live in France. I live near Paris, where I am right now. Yes. And yeah, I work in IT. And I had an interest in true crime, which came out quite recently. So, like a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, I was reading your series on John Benet Ramsey.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
So you didn't go from my YouTube video to the Van Gogh book. You went from John Benet.
Yes,
exactly.
Right? Yes.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I believe is it 9 books you wrote on John Benet?
Quite a few, yeah.
Yeah. So at some point,
I think a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I thought at a point when I was reading it through your series, I thought I'd like a little break from that. So
yeah, no, I'm sure. Look, I didn't write all 9 in one go. It was sort of one trilogy over Christmas, and then another trilogy over the next Christmas in my time, and then when some other information came out as well. So I can imagine if you read it back to back, it can be quite a lot to get through.
Yes. So I needed a break, and I thought, let's pick a story which is only one book. So.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I latched on Van Gogh, and
So have you been interested in Van Gogh previously, sort of going to museums and?
Well, casually, I went to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam a few years back.
Yeah.
I remembered it's the wheat field with crows. I mean that painting is what was quite vivid. I mean, in my mind, it's a very striking picture, because for a long time it was thought it was the painting he was painting on when he killed himself.
Yeah. Well, your contributions on the YouTube channel have always been really sort of quite a breath of fresh air, just in terms of the information you've put there. So hopefully we can flesh that out a little bit. I've got your email here, and something you say in the second sentence. I'm not sure if I understand you. You say, I don't think that there is not enough evidence to convince me beyond a reasonable doubt on a specific theory. So do you mean there is enough evidence to convince you of a specific theory, or there isn't?
No, yeah, it was a typo. I realized it after sending the email.
Okay.
So yes, I think a lot of the evidence is just circumstantial. So it's it's pretty much people having hunches. So.
No, for sure. That's what leaves it kind of wide open. And even, I think, in my defense, as someone's written a book about it and has got a theory, in my defense, even the experts, I don't think can be certain and can't prove their case. Especially the thing about the gun. A gun found 50, 60 years later, saying, well, this is the gun that he used. That's hardly evidence. It's hardly passing the forensic standard,
Yes, that's why it's very circumstantial, and also I think that museums and people in museums are quite reluctant to go for alternative theories, because they would be opening doors to questioning about the authenticity of the works they are having in their walls.
Yeah.
Because questioning
when you go into like a legal scenario, like a courtroom, if you had to, let's say this case went to court and you wanted to prosecute it, you can have cases that are entirely circumstantial. I recently, how can I put it? I sat in on a murder trial, and they kept insisting all along that all the evidence is circumstantial. In other words, there was nothing really, even though there was blood all over the place, there was nothing really connecting, and this is an ex-murderer in this case, there's nothing specific connecting him to the crime except that he was related to all the victims. And you can make a circumstantial case and get a conviction. That's not unusual.
Yes.
The question is, how strong is your circumstantial evidence? You know.
Yeah, that's true.
So my point is, I think the evidence against the suicide is actually quite strong, and then to put something in its place, I think needs to be stronger than the suicide story. I think I've done that, but I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I guess it's my idea. You know, I obviously think that, so that's what I support. But you know, in a scenario where Vincent van Gogh was supposed to have committed suicide, and you know, he never talks about it beforehand. No one notices a change of heart, really. I'm talking about people around him don't say, wow, you're looking quite sad, or you're looking this way. He's actually healthier than he's been. He's working harder than he's ever worked. He doesn't leave a suicide note. He doesn't leave the gun behind wherever he shot himself. He doesn't leave his artwork behind wherever he shot himself. And he doesn't shoot himself like anybody would ever do that, like in the head, or he doesn't hang himself.
Yeah, I mean, those are valid points. I think they weakened the idea that the suicide was planned. I think.
Yeah.
It does appear to me that if it were suicide, it would have been maybe a spur of the moment thing. But
yeah, no, I think that is possible. So there are two things I want to say that I think may, if there are people listening that have been listening all along, and let's say they're on my side, in inverted commas, that they feel, yes, no, I agree with you, you made a good case. I'm going to turn that completely on its head to throw people into complete disarray so that they're completely not sure now. And so the two things I'm going to say are, number one, Vincent's one brother committed suicide, Gogh van Gogh, he committed suicide. He was in South Africa, he was injured, not actually sure if he was injured or sick, but in any event, he was in a hospital kind of camp, and the British were coming, and at that time, the British would throw you in a concentration camp, and it would be like torture. And so the official version is that his brother committed suicide. So if you think that it's not something that a Van Gogh would do, that dismisses that theory. Yes. So that's the first point. The second point is Van Gogh said he shot himself. When the police asked who did this, he said, I shot myself. Don't blame anybody else. So that is really the biggest obstacle. And I believe I can get over it, but to me that is actually the best evidence that he did commit suicide, is him saying he committed suicide. And then you've got to say, well, how can you argue that he didn't, if he did?
Yes, and he didn't blame anyone else. And he said when he was on his bed, he said, do not blame anyone else.
Yeah, so if he said, I committed suicide and don't blame anyone else, then why on earth didn't he commit suicide? That I think is a valid question.
Yes, Vincent being, I mean, the witness of his own murder by himself, in a way.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go through your email that you sent. You wrote, something about your recent videos have been effective. Do you want to read it out? Hello?
Yes.
It's the third paragraph.
Yes, your recent videos have been effective at pointing at the fact that the letters are usually read as the words of a man who is going to take his own life. Confirmation bias. You just pay attention to what is consistent with your ideas and ignore the rest. When you read the letter about the wheat field with crows as healthy and fortifying, I had to pause and double-check the letter. Although I had read the letter multiple times, I had no memory of those words whatsoever. And yeah, I also added that if you look at the letter, Vincent added extreme loneliness later. He didn't write it at first. It was like an afterthought.
So, when you read it in the original French, does it say healthy and fortifying?
Yes, exactly. I double checked. Yes.
Yeah. So that is what I find really valuable, is that you can read it in the original and then you can see, okay, well, that's maybe not a strong point, or that is a strong point, or whatever, or well, you could also interpret that word this way or that way. And those are important words to establish, is that what he actually wrote, and it is. So, okay, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, sure, let's carry on. By pointing at Vincent's overlooked own words, you're definitely showing that these letters are not one-sided and that there is nothing explicitly suicidal about them. This reduces the breathing space of the suicide theory, especially as a deliberate and thought-out decision. If it was suicide, how much time beforehand did he decide it? To me, the spur-of-the-moment decision is still an option, but he would have been able to procure a gun likely at short notice. So either he was, he has been thinking about suicide for a few days, but it doesn't show in his letters, or it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. But then why would he have a gun with him? So some people say he had a gun, to shoot on crows, but is it really?
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Is it serious? I don't think it's serious.
So it's difficult to interrogate this, because as soon as you say something, you could say, well, that's not necessarily reliable, or maybe that's not the case. But if you take the scenario, I think of Adeline Ravoux, she said something like, well, he left that morning at the usual time. He sort of left and he went to work to paint the usual time. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, you could say, yeah, no, I don't think that's reliable. I don't believe it. On the other hand, you can say, if he did leave the usual time, then there was nothing, certainly at that time of the day, it was different. In other words, he was doing what he did every other day that day. And so then this incident must have happened in the middle of when he was painting. In other words, he's painting and then suddenly he's got a gun that he can use. That makes sense. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, if you say spur of the moment, is it spur of the moment when he woke up that morning, or is it spur of the moment just before he did it? And I don't think spur of the moment means he woke up in the morning and he thought, I think I'm going to kill myself today before I go out to work today on time, the way I normally do. I'm going to get hold of a gun. I think the fact that he went, if it is a fact, the fact that he went out just like he did every other day means he had to have gotten the gun somewhere else. Wherever he was, somewhere else, that's when the spur of the moment happened. It's already becoming quite unlikely. It's a little bit like when you say that guy committed a murder in that person committed a murder house where he didn't take a gun with him. In other words, he had to get the gun at the house, right?
Mm-hmm, yes. Well,
yeah.
Yes.
And that is actually what I believe happened. I believe the gun was at Dr. Gachet's house, where you could kind of expect a gun to be, because he was a military doctor.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, he had a gun. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to go on through your email? Just let's go a bit further.
So you want me to talk about the books then?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I've been interested in recent research about Vincent's stay in Auvergne. So by recent, I mean since the publication of the 2011 biography, The Life, by Nafy and Whitesmith. And I have read a number of books which include different authors. So yes, in 2011 there was a big stir which was caused by the biography The Life, which introduced the case that Vincent was killed by accident. And
And I think they won the Pulitzer Prize. I don't know if it was for that book, but they won it for something.
Yeah, they won it for a previous book, yes.
Oh, okay.
About Pollock. And actually, that book, caused some reactions. And one of them was a book by a French guy called Morel. So.
Okay, but let's talk about that just for a second. So, their scenario was that Vincent van Gogh kind of made some friends with some young people, and he sort of hung out a little bit with these young people, and they sort of made fun of him, but they also were like companions to him. And then how the story goes is that I'm sure you can maybe describe it better. I don't know if you've got the book with you. I have read it, but it's a very short actual description. Just that the shooting happened by accident, and I think they said something like, were they in a field, and they were sort of playing playing cowboy or something, and then the gun went off by accident, and Van Gogh happened to be in the area, and so it's almost like he was hit by a stray bullet.
Yes, but actually I don't really believe in this theory, so I didn't really investigate it a lot, because I think I did read the interview of the youngster who wasn't young anymore in 1957. And
did you see the movie At Eternity's Gate?
Yes, I've seen the scene.
Because that dramatized that moment, but in about 5 seconds. So you kind of have this long story, and then his actual death happens in a bewildering 5 seconds where you can't quite see what's happening. Yeah. And to me, the best debunk of the Nafy Smith version of events is that movie, because it's so absurd. It's basically he's sitting in a field painting. Two guys run up to him. For no reason, they pull out a gun and start struggling with him. The next thing, they shoot him. Then he runs off, and then they run off with his art stuff, and then that's it. There's no discussion. There's none of it seems natural. It all just seems like, okay, they quickly made this. I get the feeling when the guy made the film, he realized this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to have to cut it very short, otherwise people will. Yeah, that's the impression I got.
Yes, well, in the interview, the René Secrétin doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. So he doesn't say he killed Vincent. So it is.
I think that is also like the bottom line is the Nafy and Smith say René. They name him, which I think is brave of them, and at least it's courageous of them. They say this guy called René Secrétin killed Vincent by accident. When he's interviewed, he says, "No, I didn't."
Yeah.
But then you might say, well, if he said that he did it, you might have to go to court, and you might be punished if he killed somebody. So you might say, well, that's why he wouldn't admit it.
Yes, but there's a few objections, to his testimony.
Yeah.
One being that he's I think around 16 years old or 17, so
Yeah.
he's supposed to go to school.
Yeah.
So he can't be in Auvers. He's in school, he's schooled in Paris. So he's not supposed to be in Auvers. And
so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if he's in Auvers, it means he's only there on Sundays. And he's saying
Yeah.
that he hangs out with the ladies of the Moulin Rouge. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
And the thing is that on Sundays, the ladies of the Moulin Rouge are performing, so they can't be in Auvers.
And wasn't Van Gogh killed on a Monday? Sorry, no, he was killed on a Sunday, wasn't
It was, yeah, the bullet entered his body on a Sunday evening, yes.
On the Sunday, yeah.
Yes.
So, what do you think René Secretan's association with a woman may have to do with Van Gogh? Do you think he did want to meet some of the women friends that René was hanging out with, or maybe that is how Vincent met these women?
Well, I think
Or met women?
I think René Secretan was not in Auvers. I mean, at that time.
At all?
At all. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
I think he was not there. He says that Vincent gave him 6 paintings, and he described each painting. But I mean, 6 paintings is like close to 10% of his output of Auvers. So he already.
Well, what to me is fascinating, but from a head shaking point of view, is I think someone made a list of all the potential suspects and all the potentials. And one thing they said was that Buffalo Bill came to Paris, I think, for the World Fair the previous year.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And because of that, there was this kind of craze of, with the young people. He was almost like a celebrity, like, maybe Thor in the Marvel characters. And so for young people, they wanted to be like him. And so they would run around waving guns and kind of being cowboys. And it's almost like that someone took that idea and said, well, that's how Vincent was killed. Some kids were running around with a gun like Buffalo Bill, and just that's how Vincent died. And I thought that's the perfect sort of ludicrous explanation for like a colorful, creative way to kill Vincent van Gogh where he doesn't kill himself. It's like it suits the expressionism of Van Gogh, a story like that. Buffalo Bill,
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But I don't believe it's correct, though.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm just saying it's funny. But so are you saying René Secretan, did he never set foot in Auvers? Wasn't he a local?
Well, no. He was living in Paris. He was, actually he had a brother, Gaston, who was a bit older than him. And their father was a pharmacist who had 3 pharmacies in Paris.
Okay.
And they lived in Paris, and they were schooled in Paris. So Auvers was like a vacation place for them. But
so they did go to Auvers.
Well,
I mean, they did occasionally go there.
Yes. I mean, I think they may have come to Auvers. Yeah, definitely. But I doubt.
So is
they were there
based
while
on
Van Gogh
what
was
you
there.
know? So based on what you know, is there any sort of research or evidence that shows them crossing paths?
No, I'd say the evidence points rather than they didn't cross paths.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes, in his interview, he said that actually he already had left Auvers, when Vincent died. So that's even through his own words. But they used
so
to. They had a house.
So
I believe.
Did he say I never saw Vincent?
No. He said, of course, we hung out with Vincent, my brother and I. My brother Gaston was into art, so they talked about painting. we tried, we were there with the woman of the Moulin Rouge, and we tried to arouse Vincent, but that didn't work, that type of stuff.
So you're saying you don't believe it?
No, I don't believe it. No, not at all.
So it's almost like he's someone is using him to sell a story.
Yeah, sure. I think he's quite a character. Maybe a kind of Gogh type of character. Like someone who travels the world and all that. And so he was in mining, into banking and that stuff.
Okay.
And,
okay. Should we talk about Rohan, the author who found or wrote about the revolver that was found?
Sure.
In 1959 or 60.
Yes. So Alain Rohan is a local author and historian in Auvergne. And so he heard about a gun, that a gun was found in 1959 or 1960. And he started researching that in 2003. And he actually had the gun in his possession at a point. So he was able to study it and look at it, photograph it. So he wrote a whole book about it and did his own research. He was able to find, in which field the gun was found. And so he wrote a book about it, which was released in 2012 or 13. The gun itself after that was given by, it was found by a farmer. So the farmer gave it to the owners of the Ravoux Inn. And they then gave it to their daughter, who sold it in 2019.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because what I've found a little bit confusing is one story is that Vincent got the gun from the inn owner. In other words, from, I don't know what Adeline's father's name is now offhand, but the story was that he sort of just took it from under the counter. But then another story is that her father never owned a gun. And then, of course, the third story is that he got the gun afterwards, right?
You mean he got the gun after
the story? Yeah, he got the gun after it was found in the field.
Oh, no. I've heard that the suicide version. I'd say the main story is that the gun belonged to Auguste Ravoux, the father of Adeline.
Yeah. But I think Adeline said that it wasn't his. He didn't have a gun, didn't she?
No, I don't think so. No, I think actually Ravoux said it was his gun when he was he was asked. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting because in the end he did. In other words, what he's in a way saying is, I had a gun, it disappeared. He didn't say anything at the time. He didn't say anything to the police. He didn't say, my gun's gone. Mm-hmm. And then it disappears for the time that it took for Van Gogh to become famous. And then at the right time, it's found again in the field. And then he's saying, well, now this is my gun. Now it's my daughter's and I'm going to sell it again.
No, because, the thing is that when the gun was found, the Ravoux had died already for a long time. So the new owners.
Yeah, but still, it's still like it was still sold by the family. Do you know what I mean? It was still
because the owners
just sold now.
Yeah, the owners were a different family then when it was found.
But it's still the Ravoux family.
No, it was not. It was not the Ravoux family.
Wasn't it?
No. The Ravoux, Auguste Ravoux left the inn, I believe, 3 years after the death of Vincent. So
But you said it was given to a daughter. Which daughter?
Yeah. So the farmer who found the gun gave the gun to the owners of the Ravoux inn, but they were not part of the family any longer. So.
Oh, okay. So I didn't get that part.
Okay,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So they must have made quite a lot of money now with that recent sale.
Yes, yeah, they made, I believe, over 130,000 euros. So quite nice
Yeah.
for a rusty gun.
Yeah, which I don't think actually is the weapon.
Yes, actually, there's an interesting thing because Paul Gachet Jr. made a painting of the place where Van Gogh committed suicide, according to him.
See, I find all that kind of thing very interesting. Is how the Gachets float around the story, but when they need to be doing something, they don't do anything. Meaning, when Dr. Gachet was Vincent, Dr. Gachet's doctor, and when he gets shot, when he's dying, he says, "Well, I need to go. There's nothing I can do. Bye bye." But when he's dead, then he's back again, and there's a lot to do. It's just that's what I find a bit suspicious around the whole thing. Dr. Gachet, I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Did he take 11 as payment for his services?
Can you hear me?
There's quite a few.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Well, the Gachet collection, actually, I believe, was much larger than that.
But at the funeral, I think he took something like, paintings that were lying there, and he kind of just say, "Well, this is as payment for my services as a doctor," and his patient has just died. So it's hardly a success story. Maybe you can take one painting, but he took a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as I remember, yeah. And then there's also the potentially fake painting of Dr. Gachet worth millions.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe, the number of paintings is large because not all of them were painted by Vincent. So it's also an explanation. So
for those listening, I want to throw another spanner in the works. Some of you may be aware that there's also a Dr. Gachet, not a Dr. Gachet, Paul Gachet Jr., right?
Yeah, Paul Gachet Jr. is the son of the doctor.
So I think it's also possible that it could have been Paul Gachet that may have stumbled on Vincent messing around either with his sister or with the housekeeper or the housekeeper's daughter, and try to get rid of him, try to get him to leave, and shot at him or something like that, or found him in flagrante, sort of lying on the ground. I'm just saying, I believe it is Dr. Gachet, but it could also have been his son.
Yes, so you still have to take into account the fact that Dr. Gachet is not around all the time. He's working in Paris. So,
but it's also possible that he returned unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And one thing we know for a fact is Vincent returned late that night, like much later than he normally would. Like normally he came home just kind of, I think, just before or at sunset. Obviously, he couldn't paint when it was dark. And on that night, they say he came home quite late. I think something like 9 o'clock or something.
Yes, I believe it was
and so
around 9.
Yeah. So I think one's going to ask, what was he doing for those hours after the sun had gone down when he couldn't have been painting? Where was he when he was painting? And what happened when he was painting? Or when he stopped painting?
Or was he painting in the first place also?
Yeah, I mean, an obvious, I think, question to ask is, if he was going to the Gachets all the time, and it was a Sunday, and he was there, couldn't they have maybe invited him to dinner? And maybe they had a couple of glasses of absinthe or alcohol or whatever, and people drifted off to sleep or whatever, and then in that state he did something or tried to do something.
Yeah, it's an option. Yes, definitely. We know.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We know. I think the doctor was not happy with knowing, he may be around the ladies in his house while he wasn't there.
I think what the doctor liked about Vincent was he almost liked Vincent through his brother, because that's how he knew him, through Theo. So he knew Theo as a decent guy, as a sort of guy who's married or whatever, and then his brother, he can paint well. He's a bit of a strange fellow, but he can paint well, and I think he kind of, without knowing who he was very well, gave him the run of his home, and then gradually realized, wow, this guy's a bit odd. And of course, Dr. Gogh was also a bit of a nervous person.
Yeah, a bit eccentric.
Yeah. I think was it you mentioned that through the course of his letters, Van Gogh goes from calling him Dr. Gogh to Mr. Gogh to Gogh, something like that.
Yes, absolutely, yes. At first, he talks about him by saying Dr. Gogh, yes, and then it becomes Monsieur, and then just Gogh. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
and also towards the end, he just stops referring to him. In the beginning, he says, "There's a great friend, and we've got so much to talk about." But in July, he never talks about him.
Actually,
almost, and I think July was when they had an argument, wasn't it?
Yes. Actually, there's a letter where he just uses he. So he doesn't even name him. He just says he, without saying Gogh at all. So yeah, it's they definitely had an argument, and Gogh was at some point they were no longer on speaking terms. So
I think there are a lot of people who, and I felt this when I wrote about him. There are a lot of people who are fond of Vincent van Gogh. There are a lot of people who've got a soft spot for him, who feel sorry for him, who are impressed with him, who love him or whatever. But I think if you had to live with Van Gogh for 1 or 2 months, maybe even less, 1 or 2 weeks, you would go crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would go crazy. Even his brother wanted him to have him close, but not too close.
Yeah, I mean, even his brother said, you're like two people. You can sometimes be a nice guy, but sometimes you're horrible. You can be a horrible, selfish person.
Well, I think he was someone who was like very intense and.
Yeah. I think what made him. I mean, I think if you met him in passing, you might be quite charmed. If you saw him painting and you met him one day, you might be quite charmed. But I think because he was a lonely guy, and I think that also made him more intense, I think he would chew your ear off when you were talking. He would talk, and you would get like, wow, I need to leave. Almost like a blanket is over you, and you can't be yourself in a way. And it would just be him expressing himself, but there would be no end to it, kind of thing.
Yeah, man. Maybe Gogh, was able to bear with this for 2 months, but more than that, it was just impossible.
Yeah. So, my explanation, which I understand sounds a bit like it may not be right, but I think if you know Van Gogh well, if you know his brother well, if you know the whole situation well, I think the same thing with the ear incident happened with the suicide, which is you had once again a three-way arrangement. So with Gogh, there was an arrangement. It wasn't just Vincent and Gogh, how did they get along? The whole thing was predicated on doing business with Theo, who was an art dealer. So the whole idea of Gogh going to the Yellow House with Vincent was so that Theo would get certain artworks. That was part of the deal. and in that way the Van Goghs would profit from it and they would make money from it. So would Gogh. So it was kind of like a three-way deal, with the main beneficiaries being Theo and Gogh, right? Mm-hmm. And Vincent could sort of lend a little bit of credibility through that, get a little bit of rub shoulders with a successful artist and whatever. But so when the ear thing happened, if it was Gogh that chopped off his ear, he can't now interfere with this business relationship. He doesn't want to. His brother's in a fragile state as it is already in terms of his business, and so he's got to let his brother's business work. And also, he's getting money from his brother, so they've kind of got to take it on the chin. And Vincent's got to say, "Sorry, it was me. Blame me," kind of thing. And that is why I think he suffered so much in that asylum. Is it wasn't him, and he almost did that like a messiah. He sort of took someone else's sins upon him on the cross, but it was quite a heavy burden for him. And I think, look at what he missed out on. He missed out on the Paris World Fair, and he lost his ear and all this kind of thing. You might say, well, I don't know if I think that, but if you take that same scenario into the suicide, and you say suicide/murder, and you say, what if the same thing happened? Vincent didn't cut off his own ear, he didn't shoot himself. Somebody else did, but you can't say who that person is because it's the same situation all over again. There's a third party who Theo's got business dealings with, or who is important in the art circles, and Theo's got to preserve his fragile sort of network. And so if they blame Dr. Gachet, it's like shooting himself in the foot. And we know very clearly from the letters in July that Theo's business was suffering. He was in a very fragile place. And I think what the Van Gogh brothers decided between them was kind of like, well, I'm shot already. There's nothing we can do about it. Same thing with the ear. I've already lost the ear. No point in blaming someone else. Let's just make the best of it. And isn't that the same kind of tone you get with Van Gogh? He says, look, I did this to myself. Don't blame anyone else. Do you know, I can't think of too many people who've shot themselves who will say, don't blame anyone else. They'll just say, I did it. They won't say, don't blame someone else. Why would you say that?
Yeah, I think you have a point with Dr. Gachet. He was a very connected person. He had an extensive network. Yeah. I did put my hands on a book by his son, and his relationship network was like hundreds of people. He was connected with hundreds of artists.
Mm. And big artists, I mean, Monet, can you name them? They were, Cesaro,
Pissarro,
lots of them.
Guillaume.
Yeah, Pissarro, yeah.
Émile Bernard.
And so for an art dealer like Theo to sort of go, wow, you shot my brother, would be like declaring war on the kind of declaring war on the art, one side of the art community. You would be on the wrong side of that battle.
Yes, and the thing is, when he came to the inn, it wasn't sure he was going to die. Maybe he was going to live. So when you read Theo's letter to Johanna, in the same letter, he says his life could be at stake, but then he says, a bit further down, he writes, maybe he'll make it through because he's been already through hard times and he's done it before. So it is completely an option that he will recover from that. So maybe by not accusing anyone, he's protecting his own future. If he survives.
I also think if you just go through Van Gogh's backstory, just the many times he caused embarrassment and discomfort and problems because of things he did with other women. You know, the thing that he did with Sean, the prostitute, and his cousin, and it sort of would embarrass his family. And I think this was just yet another example of that, where maybe he drank something, maybe he tried to make a move or something, and maybe the doctor sort of felt like, wow, you got syphilis, don't get your paws on my daughter, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, who would know better than the doctor that he had syphilis?
Yeah, and we know the doctor didn't want to have Vincent touching his daughter, because.
So is it true that because there's not much information about Dr. Gachet's wife, is it true that she died of tuberculosis?
Well, that's what Paul Gachet writes in his book. He said it took her 2 years to die, basically.
Because I wonder whether she didn't die of syphilis.
Actually, there's very little information about her.
Yeah.
Everything we know comes from Paul Jr.
Yeah. So something else I just want to let the readers know that haven't read my book. One thing that's for me quite suspicious is after Vincent van Gogh dies, there's like this secret vault of his paintings with Dr. Gachet. It's like nobody knows exactly how many paintings he's got. Like I said, when he died, I don't know the exact number, it's something like 6 or 9 or 11, I don't know, but it's quite a few paintings that Dr. Gachet took as payment. And then they disappeared for quite a long time, like 30, 40 years. And then suddenly the vault opens and there are now stacks of paintings, like 30 paintings or 40 paintings. I'm not saying it's exactly 30 or 40, just that the original amount seems now to have multiplied. And then you say, how did that happen? And at the same time, Van Gogh's legend has leveraged. He's suddenly become an important figure. And suddenly the Gachets have got this valuable art, which they, I think, eventually sold to French museums for a fortune.
Yeah, some of them were given and some of them were sold, indeed, yes. For millions, yes. I believe the church in Auvers was sold for like 7 million francs.
Yeah, and the most contentious piece is, of course, the other portrait of Dr. Gachet, which to me, I mean, the one looks completely different to the other. These eyes look different. And then it's the other one is missing. Isn't the original portrait of Dr. Gachet missing?
Well, it was sold in 1990 to a Japanese buyer, and then we know the buyer died in 1996, I believe, and then the painting.
And there was a fire.
No. The fire was with another painting, you know.
Okay.
The sunflower, the painting which burned was the sunflowers. That was in 1944,
okay.
1945. But the portrait of Dr. Gachet.
The portraits, no one has seen it.
So yeah, pretty much no one has seen the portrait of Dr. Gachet since 1990.
Yeah, I mean, that's like 30 years. One would think, I mean, who knows, it might reappear in 12 days from now, you know, like there it is.
Well,
it just seems a bit strange that you've got two portraits and the one is gone, you know. And yeah. I must admit, I was like, you know, I have my theory of what happened. I've got a gut feel for what happened. And when I stood in front of Dr. Gachet's house in Auvers and the picture depicting, you know, the picture that is representing Van Gogh in front of the house is the other portrait. The one that to me looks fake. That to me was like a penny dropping, you know.
Yeah, I believe the one which everyone can see in Paris is not as good. I mean, it's obviously not as good. There's no question.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about is Adeline Revue a mouthpiece for Louis and Frey? I mean, I still want to go through that.
Yes.
She wrote an incredible biographical letter. I also want to go through that on the YouTube channel, but let's just go through that.
Yes. So yeah, in a nutshell, no one cared about Adeline Ravoux until the centennial of Van Gogh's birthday in 1953, when she was found and interviewed by the press. Later that year, Louis Anfray, a Swiss Van Gogh amateur, published Adeline Ravoux's recollections about the last days of Vincent. And those recollections are like the standard version of Adeline Ravoux's recollections. And since Louis Anfray is known for believing that the Gachet forged the only known Van Gogh etching, Man with a Pipe, some people believe that Adeline Ravoux's recollections are tainted, unreliable, and targeted against Paul Gachet's recollections. Yes, so basically Louis Anfray thought that the only etching made by Van Gogh was a fake, and he worked on that. And given the fact
I agree with that, though. I also think that etching of the Gachet doesn't look like Van Gogh. Doesn't look like his work.
Yeah, it does. It looks a bit inspired by the portrait of the doctor, because he has his head tilted to the side.
Yeah. But if you compare it to his other drawings, it looks different. Looks very different to me.
Yeah, and the thing is that the Gachet was a keen practitioner of etchings, while Van Gogh had absolutely no experience. So he had a printing press, and he was doing etching all the time. So that's a bit suspicious.
I also think there's some irony in the fact that at the end of all of this, so you have this great saga of Van Gogh. Van Gogh does this, he does that, he paints this, he paints that, and at the end of it, the portrait of Dr. Gachet emerges as the at the top of the pyramid. The portrait of Dr. Gachet is the most celebrated painting, and you say, how did that happen? And then there's also this etching, and if you are involved in fraud or something, you've got to say, well, isn't this kind of a narcissistic person, someone who thinks a lot of himself? And we know Dr. Gachet had this sort of weird preoccupation where he wanted desperately to be an artist, and maybe that drove him to a criminal degree. That envy, you know what I mean? That envy to have a famous artist paint him. And then he didn't like the painting, and he wanted a painting where his eyes look blue or something like that. Just thinking it's something to think about.
Yeah, I think most people who had portraits done by Vincent didn't like their portraits. I mean,
yeah, that's also true. And I must say, compared to the other portraits, the one of Dr. Gachet is a bit more recognizable. Like if you compare the Arlésienne and the the Arlésienne's not too bad, but if you look at Adeline Ravoux, it's not that great. It's actually terrible.
Yeah, there's one.
And the one of Marguerite Gachet is also terrible.
Yeah, Marguerite Gachet looks very old on the painting where she's at the piano.
She doesn't look desirable.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to talk about letter RM20?
Yes, sure. So yes, you know that Vincent didn't date each letter he wrote. So some scholars did go over the correspondence and try to find dates for the letters for which a date was missing. And Jan Hosker was an expert on the correspondence, and he offered the dates which are now generally accepted. However, there's another scholar who believes that one letter has not been dated correctly, and that letter is called RM20. RM means related manuscript.
Okay.
Which means basically it's a piece of paper we don't know what to do with. So depending on the date of that letter, it does change the dynamics between Vincent and the doctor. Because in the letter, he writes, Let's talk now about Dr. Geshe. I went to see him the day before yesterday, and I didn't find him. I think we must in no way count on Dr. Geshe. And he underlines in no way twice. So, to one researcher, this means that that's the end of the relationship, the end of the friendship between Vincent and Geshe. And since, you know, the generally accepted date is May 24th, it would mean it was written 4 days after he arrived in Auvers. So, I mean, if that date is correct, it's not the end of the relationship between Geshe and Vincent.
Yeah. I think it is more likely July 10th, like what Landais says.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, one of his points is that the next day, so the 25th of May, he writes, "Today I saw Dr. Geshe again. He seems very reasonable to me." I mean, how can you on one day say we must in no way count on him, and on the next day find him very reasonable?
So it just shows you there was like a temperamental problem between the two, that they would get along and then they didn't get along, you know. And I remember early on when he described Dr. Geshe, he said, you know, when he smiled, it was like almost like cracking glass, you know, like his face was so etched with grief. It was almost like he never smiled, and so when he did smile, you know, do you remember him saying that? And the other thing that he said was, "Theo, you guys should come stay with Dr. Geshe, except his house is so cluttered, you won't be able to stay here." So you kind of got the sense that Geshe kind of had parts of him were functional, like the parts that were interested in art and so on, but other parts, maybe like thinking about his wife and family, had shut down. So it was almost like he was a half a person in a way. But almost the same with Vincent as well, that Vincent could paint and all that kind of thing, but he couldn't deal with people that well. And they were both similar in that way, maybe.
Yeah, probably with the exception of his son, because I think his son and himself, they were like a pair. And if you look at the way the son behaved, he was very much the continuation of his father.
Yeah. I must say, as much as I think Geshe was Vincent's nemesis, I don't know whether Van Gogh would have become famous, whether his art would have become valuable if he'd never met Dr. Geshe. I just wonder about that. On the other hand, you could say, well, the letters would have done it, his art would have done it. But if you think about Geshe's connections, and he was sort of connected to higher society, and that's important in the art world. It was not just that; it was also Vincent's brush with Gogh that gave Vincent a little bit of a, they say a hupstoot in Dutch, a bit of a leg up that he otherwise I don't think he would have had. What do you think about that?
Well, I think his most amazing work is probably in Saint-Rémy. I mean, he did excellent work in Auvers. I think Auvers and Saint-Rémy are the two the highlights of his art. And I think he would have probably been able to, had not he been in Auvers, I think he would have been to pull off, you know, something quite nice still. But
so
that's speculative.
So if you think about the year he spent in Saint-Rémy, so he's surrounded by madmen, he's alone, he isn't happy. We know that from his letters. He says, you know, I'm not happy, I'm desperate, all that sort of thing. Why doesn't he commit suicide then? You know, he's just lost his ear, he's lost his friend, he's lost almost everything in a way, and he's in like an asylum, far from home, no one's coming to visit him. He's kind of just been kind of, I'm not saying, I know it's been overblown a little bit that the residents of all kicked him out, but I think there wasn't, to an extent, a sense of that he wasn't welcome there anymore, that he did leave there in disgrace. And so I think that fell on him quite heavily, that, you know, I didn't do this, and I'm just saying, can you imagine if he did cut off his own ear? So he did cut off his own ear, now he's in the asylum. Why don't you commit suicide then? Why do you want to go and sort of make another try at being happy? Why not commit suicide then?
Yeah.
Conversely, if he didn't cut off his ear and he's going to the asylum almost to show to his brother, look, I'm going to try and stop drinking, I'm going to try and behave, I'm going to try and kind of, get my life back on track. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not a lowlife or whatever. I'm going to make up for what I've done. I'm going to make up for the scandal. I'm going to almost like sentencing himself to go to prison kind of thing. And then he does it, and then he says, I'm ready to leave here. And his brother's like, okay, ready to leave. So again, when he leaves Saint-Remy, all I'm saying is that same self-deprecating psychology of, it's my fault, I shouldn't have done this, I'm going to admit myself to the asylum, is also when he gets himself into trouble with the Dr. Gogh, and he says, it's my fault, don't blame anyone else, I shot myself. Don't they match?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. When he was in Saint-Remy, he had some very deep. He went in very deep down, and he was not able to paint for I think 3 weeks or something like that, and he didn't commit suicide then.
Yeah.
Because when he is not well, he's unable to paint. I mean, he doesn't paint when he's mad.
So
quotes.
So I don't know how you think about it as a scientific person, but I'm someone who writes a lot, I think a lot, and so on. And there are definitely times where I go through a low patch, and you go through. You're not that motivated to write. You don't really have much to say or whatever. And then there are other times where you're motivated and you just can't stop. You could write day and night if someone would allow you to, kind of thing. And Vincent seemed to be doing that right up until the moment that he died. He didn't paint Wheatfield with Crows the day that he died. He painted easily another 10 or 12 paintings after that. You can actually see the list on Wikipedia, the list of artwork. So, and on the day that he died, he went to paint. And that to me is just intuitively like I'm going out to paint, I'm motivated to paint, I'm painting. Oh, suddenly I'm not. It doesn't happen like that. You would, if you felt that day not motivated to paint, then you would have a story. But the fact that he went out to paint that day shows everything he says that month in July. He's talking about the future. He's met other artists. He's talking about, we're going to get through this, and the horse is still going to get up onto the hill. And, I don't know, I can't right now go into all those little things he said in his letter, but all of it adds up to him and his brother are thinking positively about the future, even though they've had a setback. Both of them are sort of hopeful, and you can kind of see that they're fighting to make it. That makes sense.
Yeah, actually, Theo was thinking about resigning from his position, and he thought about it and decided he would not resign, and he would keep on working. So I think he had decided to carry on and keep go through those rough times, and stay afloat and keep on working.
Yeah. I haven't gotten to it yet, but the very last letter Vincent wrote to Theo, the very last thing he said in that letter, not maybe the very, very last thing, but one of the last things he said, can you send me a lot of art supplies for me and I think Hershey? Right?
Yes.
So he made actually an unusually large order for artwork in his last letter. So if he was worried that it was a burden to his brother, why has the last letter got a not just a normal order for art supplies, but a bigger than usual order, you would think it would be either less than usual or none, and yet it's bigger than usual. So it can't be that.
Yeah, or maybe, if you're suicidal, why bother writing at all? Just end it there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so do you want to go through those last tidbits in your email right at the end?
Yes. So yes, I believe Dr. Gogh never wrote to Theo about a medical condition with Vincent. I'm not aware of any letter about that. He did not. So there's an interesting thing actually that about the supposed incident with Vincent. At what time Dr. Gogh said that Vincent threw a tantrum about a painting which was not framed when he came to the Dr. Gogh's house.
The first time.
He came to. One day he came to the Gogh house. He saw a painting which was not framed, and he asked Dr. Gogh to frame it because he thought the painting was too good.
Yeah.
And when he came back a second time, the painting was still not framed, and then he almost threatened to kill the doctor. Well, of course, this is complete rubbish.
I seem to remember that dramatized in Lust for Life.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That moment, was it a Pissarro that wasn't framed?
It was a Guillaumin.
Okay.
It was a woman with a Japanese fan.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a Guillaumin painting.
Yeah, so you can imagine him saying something like that can really sour relations. Like, if you don't frame this picture, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
This picture deserves to be framed.
Yeah.
That's going to cause tension.
Yeah. Well, of course it didn't happen because Vincent had plenty of paintings which were not framed. And he was perfectly happy with a very simple frame for his paintings when they were on walls. So it's probably an invention by Gogh.
Come from?
I'm sorry?
Where does the story come from that he did that?
Well, I think Gogh needs an explanation. Why aren't they friends anymore?
Okay.
He doesn't want to say.
It doesn't sound like a. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he doesn't want to say it's because Vincent was interested in either Marguerite or Elisa, and he was kicked out of the house. I guess Gogh wants to find another story about why they are no longer friends, because he knew Vincent.
I think it started with Gogh, the whole thing of how we're going to make the story work. It's got. I've got to be the hero. But we've still got to make sure Vincent comes out of this as the great artist, and somehow he found a way, I guess. And no one wants to mess with that story.
Yeah, but the thing is, since he never wrote to Theo about a condition with Vincent, there's very little leverage.
Gogh never really treated Vincent either. The only treatment I know of was he said, keep working.
Yes, exactly. That was
the only treatment that he, and then maybe, I don't know whether the digitalis whether he ever took any, but I do know there was a point where Theo said to Vincent, if you're not feeling well, go to Dr. Gogh and he'll perk you up. He'll give you something to perk you up. I remember that happening fairly recently. But whether he did or not, I don't know.
Yeah, but if you take other doctors, when Vincent was in Saint-Rémy, Theo got letters from the doctors, Dr. Perron, for instance.
Yeah.
And Gogh never wrote to Theo. So I'm my hunch is that there was no problem with Vincent.
So okay, look, we've been talking for 70 minutes. I don't want it to be too long. I think we shouldn't be more than an hour and 20.
Okay.
Something I want to tell you that I actually haven't told anyone really yet. That's quite an important part of the story is When I went to Orvez myself last year, and I went to Dr. Gachet's house, and I spoke to the people there. I asked the same question there as I asked to the people, the tour guides in the Rabu Inn. I said, quite a simple question. I said, where did Vincent die? Not die, where was he shot? Where did it happen? And they said, no, well, we don't know. So I said, hold on, so you know where he painted this, you know he painted that, you know where he said this, you know where he had this restaurant, where he ate at this restaurant with his brother, you know this and that and that and that, but you don't know where he died. Yes. Okay. Does anyone have any idea where he died? No. I could maybe in the field. But it was actually quite hard to even get them to that point where you say, okay, so where do you think, not where he died, where he was shot. So you say, where do you think he was shot? And then they don't really want to even say anything. They don't want to say, well, it's in that direction, or it's on that hill, or it's just, no, well, we don't know. I think when I was at the Ravu Inn, I asked the same question. The woman said, do you know where Wheatfield with Crows was painted? So I said, yes. So she said something like, well, you know, he painted Wheatfield. Did you know that Wheatfield was with Crows was the last painting? I said, no, it wasn't. And this is the tour guide.
Oh.
So you got the tour guide telling everyone the same story that isn't true. And when someone comes along like me that knows a little bit, then you kind of have a problem, because they don't, I don't know whether they don't know or they've been told by, like, I don't know whether it's all part of one sort of system, like the Van Gogh Museum works with the Ravu Inn, and the Ravu Inn works with the Dr. Gachet, whatever, the house. I don't know whether they all agree that everyone must say the same thing, but something as simple as, where was Vincent shot? Nobody knows, and nobody seems to even think about it. And from a true crime perspective, it's pretty much the most important question, because from that question, everything else starts getting answered. Is you say, oh, if he was shot there, well then, you know, it's close to that person's house, or it's not close to anyone's house, or, you know, he was in a private place where, you know, he didn't want to be seen, or it was in public, or it was in a field where little kids ran around. But for no one to not only know where he got shot, but not care, like, you've got to say to them, okay, where was he shot? No, I don't know. Then now you've got to convince them to care about it. Well, why don't you know? Like, do you have any idea? And they live there. They live there and they work there. You're telling me that they haven't thought about it. And it is central to the question is, where he got shot is probably going to tell you who shot him. Because quite simple, if he was at Dr. Gachet's house when he shot himself, I don't think he shot himself. If he was in Dr. Gachet's barn, that sort of out that area just around there, and he got shot there, or he shot himself there, I don't think he shot himself. So if he was in any area where there were other people, nobody commits suicide in front of other people, then that is going to tell you something about where it happened. Also, where was his artwork when he shot himself? Did he take his artwork to Dr. Gachet and then go for a walk away and shoot himself there? Or did he get shot where his artwork was, and then why did his artwork disappear? Because that's kind of a suicide note in itself. Is not a suicide note, a note is, this person got shot, the gun and the artwork disappeared. Why would someone who committed suicide, or someone who saw someone commit suicide, do that? You know?
Yeah.
Isn't that the biggest problem?
Yes, it is. I mean, I agree. It's things. Well, yeah, we can't explain it.
If you saw someone or you heard, and that's another thing that I must also point out. Nobody hears a gunshot.
Yes.
It's a Sunday evening, presumably. It's a Sunday evening. I've been in Orvez myself. When a train moves through there, I could hear it from miles away because it's like an echo chamber. The whole area is like almost like a semi-cylindrical valley. So any sound there is kind of accentuated. When you walk down the streets, you can hear sounds from quite a long distance away because of the ridge on the one side that goes the entire length of the town. So even sounds that are around you hear. You hear sounds from kind of distance away. So something like a gunshot in such a small town, why did nobody hear it at night on a Sunday? I mean, you shouldn't hear gunshots normally on a Sunday,
Yeah.
No one's going to be plowing the field on the Sunday or whatever. So why did nobody hear the sound? And I think the answer is people did hear the sound, but either they were sworn to secrecy or they didn't say anything. Because bear in mind, if Dr. Gogh did do this, then he's a very powerful figure in that town. And if people know that he did something or fear that he did something or suspect that he did something, he's got more wealth than they do. So you can't accuse him easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see.
Huh?
Yeah, I see, yes. Yeah.
If someone said, I think Dr. Gogh murdered Vincent, what do you think would have happened? I think he would have said, no, I didn't.
Yeah, he was he had a position of power, so people would have sided with him.
And he was not only, you have it with the Madeleine McCann case as well. You've got 2 doctors who were on holiday there, and then you also had another 3, I think. I think there were another 3 doctors. I can't quite remember exactly how many there were. But they were a core group of doctors, and what a powerful lobby group they created. Whether you believe the McCanns are guilty or not, they created a very powerful kind of force in their favor. And a lot of it is just based on the fact that they're doctors. Now, Gogh wasn't just a doctor, he was also a military doctor, so he's also got military contacts and high-profile people that he knows, I guess. I'm just saying he was a powerful figure, and as I said, because he's such a powerful figure, Van Gogh became such a powerful figure as well. I think there's this yin and yang about it, unfortunately, where Gogh, who was, I think, Van Gogh's nemesis, also turned him into a legendary figure, but also a mythological figure, and also, of course, himself. Portrait of Dr. Gogh.
Yeah, it's he loved one of the self-portraits Vincent did, and he was enthusiastic that Vincent would paint his portrait.
And it happened right in the beginning. I mean, I don't know, I think I'd forgotten that, is that Vincent arrived in Orvez and almost immediately he paints Dr. Gogh, like first thing that happens.
Yeah. Although he didn't, the doctor I believe wanted to have the portrait, but he did not give the portrait to him.
He did not?
No. I believe. Well, maybe I should double check that, but I think he did not give it to the doctor.
Vincent didn't give the portrait to him?
Yes, I think so.
Now, I'm just saying he did the portrait right in the beginning, like
yes.
Almost within a day or 2 or 3 of arriving at Orvez, he did that portrait. So it certainly didn't waste any time. And then that portrait is like his most important work, most valuable work as well. Do you want to talk quickly about Marguerite's age?
Yes. Well, through the letters, we see that Vincent talks about Marguerite and Paul Gogh Jr. And what's interesting is that he's wrong about the age of Marguerite, because he writes that Marguerite is 19 years old, but she actually turned 21 which was the age of majority when Vincent was in Auvers. So yeah, some people suspect that Gachet wanted to keep Marguerite away from Vincent by lying about her age, because Vincent was correctly informed about the age of Paul Gachet Jr., who was 16 years old. So
have you seen Loving Vincent?
Yes, I've seen it quite some time ago, yes.
You remember the part where there's the guy by the boats, by the river, and then he talks about Vincent coming there with Marguerite, and they sometimes got into the boat together, and then this guy says that they looked very happy together, something like that. Remember that?
Actually, no, I don't remember this scene. Yeah. Can you?
So that's something that I would love to know if there's a basis for that anywhere, whether that's and look, that animated movie is very good. A lot of it's based on letters that or facts that we know and paintings that we know he painted, but that particular part I haven't been able to verify. I mean, it makes sense, but it also fits very perfectly. Anyway, what they claim in the letter is that Vincent, you know that Vincent painted a couple of people going off in the boats there, in those sort of canoes. You know that painting?
No, I'm not sure I know it. Yeah. What is it?
I'll maybe talk about it in the next episode, but
okay.
It's depicted in Loving Vincent that you sort of see Vincent himself get into the boat, and he gets in the boat with Marguerite.
Okay.
And the guy says, you know what, you could just see that they felt something for one another in their eyes. And I just wondered, is there any more substance to this? Because it's interesting. Yeah. And I guess the only substance is, in a way, this author who talks about the age of majority, and that he also suspected this.
Yeah, I think in the letters there's no mention of that. And the other witness would have been Paul Gachet Jr., but he almost said nothing about his sister. His sister was a ghost. So he erased Elisa, and he barely mentioned Marguerite. And
another thing that I know, I don't quite know how I know, but apparently Marguerite kept a painting of Vincent in her home her whole life.
So she owned her own portrait, playing the piano.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
And she kept it until, I believe, until the late 1940s, and. So basically, yeah, she owned it for over 50 years. It was on her wall in the house in Auvers, because she never moved out of the house. She lived all her life in the house in Auvers. And she had a painting.
Did she
there.
Ever marry?
No, she never married.
So if you just think about it, if you compare Adeline Reboux, she didn't like her portrait, right? And I think she was right. And then you compare the difference of Marguerite, who keeps a portrait that I don't think is much better than Adeline's, to be honest. She keeps it in her house her whole life and never gets married. And you say, could something have happened there that sort of disturbed her? That maybe she did like Vincent, and something happened, and then she felt guilty about it, and so she never got married after that because of an incident.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yes, definitely.
Okay, and then the last part, Gachet's 1858 thesis.
Yes. So his thesis is online, so anyone who reads French can read it. In his thesis, his thesis was about depression, and so he specialized in depression. And there's a paragraph in which he explains how to tell the difference between a suicide and a homicide, because with people with depressions, well, suicide happens. And he suggests relying on the following indications. Cause of death. So he lists methods used for suicide by order of frequency. So for him, jumping from a high point, asphyxiation, drowning, firearms, hanging, blaze, and poison are usually used for suicide in that order, rather than homicides. Then using defensive wounds is an interesting way to tell the difference between suicide and homicide. Looking at the face, if the body has a tense or frightened face, and also the conditions of death, meaning the circumstances. How did the person die? So he addressed that question in his doctoral thesis.
Yeah, I mean, that is so ironic. It's crazy. It's actually quite creepy. What I find so, and I'm very grateful to you for highlighting all of this and for speaking to me today. What I find so incredibly valuable about this particular point is this is based on Gog's own experience in 1858. So today, you might say the methods used for suicide in order of frequency would be different. It might be hanging first and shooting second, something like that, right?
Yes.
But because I've investigated it with other crimes, shooting is definitely shooting and hanging are pretty high up today in society today. And if you look at that list, number 1 is high point, 2 is asphyxiation, which I guess I'm not quite sure if that is how you're asphyxiating yourself, but because the next one's drowning, 3, and firearms is only number 4, and after firearms is hanging, 5. So firearms is number 4 there, and so you've got Vincent apparently using a firearm as number 1. And there was a river there, so he could have drowned himself. Other artists or famous people have drowned themselves as well, like Virginia Woolf. And there were also high points there, although I don't know if there were too many high points. You could maybe have jumped off the bridge.
Yeah, actually, the Gogh house is next to a kind of cliff, so.
Yeah. It's not extremely high. I mean, it's high enough that you could get hurt, but you could also somehow survive it. You could also maybe jump off the church, climb up the church and jump off that way. But definitely drowning. The point that I'm trying to make is that firearms weren't like around like they are today. So getting a firearm, like just, oh, that guy's got a gun, I've got it. I don't have my research in front of me, but I remember there being some dispute that he would necessarily have either gotten the gun from the innkeeper or that he would have been able to, just because they weren't that common. And my case is just that whether or not he got it from the innkeeper, it would have been much more certain that Gogh would have had one because of his military career, because he was in the army, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. I'm sorry I've sort of pushed you along. I'm just very sensitive to, I've recorded myself on my phone, although it's with video, and it's often a very big file. Okay. So I didn't want it to be like a huge file that you then struggle to transfer. So.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, I'll find a way I'll send you a link so you can download it.
Okay. I just want to say thanks so much for your time. I hope you're going to continue to comment on the series, and especially when we get to dealing with the events of the 27th, 28th, 29th. And obviously, where you have a difference of opinion, you're welcome to say, well, actually the facts show this, or I'm not sure if I agree with that or whatever, because I'm trying to find what actually happened, whether it supports what I'm saying or not. And I just don't think the madness narrative works, and I don't think the ear narrative works, just because he also never said he cut off his ear. And I never thought that I would be debunking the suicide narrative, but when I went and investigated it, it just didn't make sense. But if someone can show me a story that does make sense, then I'll accept it. In other words, it makes more sense than the one that I'm aware of, you know?
Yeah, I understand. Well, I always try to keep my comments relevant to what's being discussed in the video. So that's my idea of comments.
So I hope you will commit yourself by the end of the series to say, not necessarily that there's enough evidence to say X, Y, or Z, but to say, in my opinion, whatever, I think this happened. X or Y happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
In other words, I'm asking you to not sit on the fence.
Yes, I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. It's really good having someone who knows so much about Van Gogh, and sometimes I felt a little bit embarrassed because I wrote this book quite a while ago. I haven't read my own book in a while, and I'm going through the letters exclusively. I'm not doing much research beyond that, so I don't have it at my fingertips. Okay. And in some areas, you definitely know the details better than I do, so I feel a little embarrassed about that.
No,
but
don't worry about it. There's,
Yeah.
there is room for interpretation. So it's I think everyone is welcome.
I'm trying
to have ideas.
I'm trying. Sorry.
Yeah, I think everyone is welcome to have ideas about the story because there is room for discussion.
Yeah, I'm trying to build a circumstantial case, but actually on the psychology, saying like what kind of guy was Vincent, based on his behavior, his words, his thinking, his psychology, and then also to an extent the people around him. And to me, that's the strongest case I can make, and I accept that it's a circumstantial case,
Mm-hmm.
But even the circumstantial psychology fits in with the evidence, with the forensic evidence, with the trajectory of the bullet. I'm just saying, if he wanted to kill himself, he would have killed himself. He wouldn't have shot himself in his stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And also, do you shoot yourself and then stumble home and get into bed and then ask for a doctor? Like, if you say, I want to kill myself, then you say, oh, I've killed myself or I've shot myself. I'm not going to go and lie in bed, but please get a doctor. And one thing I know that he said, get this out of me, like get the bullet out of me. And I think Gogh said, I can't, it's too late or something. So why would he say that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Wasn't there also a second doctor on the scene as well? There was a second doctor also treating him.
Yeah. Yes. There was.
And you've also got to wonder about that. I mean, if he has a doctor, why do they need another doctor? Well, isn't it because there's something wrong with this doctor, kind of thing?
Yeah, because I guess Gogh wasn't really acting like a doctor, at least not on the two last days of Vincent's life.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. 95 minutes.
Well, yes, thanks for your call.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me. Maybe we can have a short discussion about just the day when we deal with that last letter. Maybe we can have a 20-minute discussion about that. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll
Okay.
have to read it, yes.
Okay. Just know my listeners really enjoy your comments, and also like someone who's so educated on the topic. So that would be something to look forward to as well.
Yeah, I like very much the topic of Van Gogh. So I enjoy reading about it.
Is everything okay in France now with the COVID-19? Are you guys under lockdown?
No, so the lockdown has been over for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, I worked from home for about 3 months.
Okay.
And now, I mean, we can, I just go back to work as usual. However, we are wearing masks, face masks.
Okay.
In,
Is there no rebounding